A quick glance at the headlines on any given day is enough to unsettle almost anyone. Terrorism, ethnic conflict, natural disaster, economic uncertainty are just a few of the signs that make it seem like our world is just coming apart at the seams. Popular speaker, teacher, and author Jeanne Nigro says that despite it all, we surely can stand strong in uncertain times. Good to have you with us today,
It's wonderful
Jeanne.
to be here.
And as we kind of mentioned at the open of the program today, you know, one of your core messages is that intimacy with God is critical for being able to stand through the storms that come our way, especially in apocalyptic days. So tell us a little bit about the the strength of that message and why it's so important for us today.
Yeah, well, Stephan, the only thing that can't change is our intimacy with God. And we're in this time when everything is changing every day. It's a little bit scary to turn the news on every morning. You never know what's going to be on there.
Right.
And I think that what's happening is that many of us are falling, and I know myself it happened, fell to fear of the end times, of what's going to be on the news next, how is that going to impact me. And one of the things that God showed me was the key anchor to standing strong through these uncertain times, because we don't know how much more difficult it's going to get. We don't know how much, you know, we know that the times are getting darker and darker. But the only thing that can't change is that intimacy with Him. And really, intimacy is our purpose for being here. It's why we exist, is to know Him and to make Him known. And so as we grow in intimacy with Him, then we will stand strong against the deception that's there, that's increasing, against the persecution that's increasing. And we will also be able to partner with Him because He's called us to a specific purpose. It's not an accident that we're here at this time. And so as we grow in intimacy with Him, we connect with what is He calling us to do for this time.
What would you say is the #1 roadblock to intimacy with God?
I think right now it's fear and stress and frustration, really.
So 3.
Yeah, come to think of it, fear and stress kind of go together. You know, I call stress is like the socially acceptable word for fear, because we know the Bible says do not fear,
Right.
but it doesn't say do not stress. So we think as believers, well, I don't fear, I know that's sin, but I can stress. Everybody stresses. That's just what you do in 2016. But yet stress blocks you from intimacy with God. And anything that you're focused on, you know, other than God, or that's controlling how you feel.
Right.
You know,
what you're thinking about.
is what's controlling how I feel right now. If it's not how God sees me, if it's how someone else sees me, or if it's the fact that this guy's going too slow in front of me, you know, the things we get stressed out about, it blocks our intimacy with God. And someone else is on the throne of our lives at that moment other than God.
So really that's a critical thing, is to make sure that, and to keep focused on God being the center of your life, on the throne of your life, because His throne is never shaken.
Absolutely. And He's seated on the throne.
Yes.
You know, so He's not stressed out on the throne, just pacing around. He's seated on the throne.
You mentioned ways to kind of get closer and to build that intimacy with the Lord in your book, Unshaken. And you kind of use a football analogy. Talk a little bit about that.
You know, I was praying about it, and I'm not, I used to be a Browns and a Buckeye fan when I lived in Ohio, but one thing the Lord just showed me was there's offensive strategies and there's defensive strategies. And just, you know, we've got a team of Satan's army against us, always trying to get us away from our goal of intimacy with Him. So we need to actively pursue intimacy with Him. It's not something that we wake up with and, you know, one day we have it, one day we don't. That's what we think. Well, God's there today. He's not. He must be on vacation today. You know, you don't feel His presence. But yet we can actively pursue intimacy with Him by just dwelling on how He sees us, you know, who He is, what's on His heart, speaking out loud, declaring Scripture, thanking Him throughout the day. Thank you that that You're with me, that I'm not alone. You know, so we can see Him as our bridegroom. You know, thank you that your heart's ravished for me. Just being aware of and reminding ourselves, I have to do that all day. So those are some of the offensive strategies. And then defensively, we need to be committed, especially in these end times, to being aware of what blocks intimacy and dealing with it. Not allowing fear and stress to block intimacy. Not allowing frustration and anger and bitterness to block intimacy. And we have to be committed to that, and that's the defensive strategy. So I talk about how do we break through those barriers to intimacy.
You know, we had a guest on the show maybe a couple weeks ago who talked about cultural Christians, Christians who go to church every now and then, you know, Christmas, Mother's Day, you know, the holidays, but they don't really get into the Word and they don't pray. You cannot have intimacy with God if you don't know what He says about you.
And,
And the only way
yeah.
we can know what he says is to go to his word. Correct?
Absolutely, Valerie. And God was just speaking to me about that recently. I was driving by churches and parking lots, and they were full, and I was thinking, do they really know who God is, or is it just to feel good for an hour on Sunday, and then the rest of the week is just going to work and not really being connected to him? And what grieves my heart the most is that type of relationship with him isn't going to cut it in the end times.
Right.
If we have that shallow or just social relationship, with going to church, we will fall to deception, we'll fall away, we'll fall to persecution. How do you stand strong in persecution? We don't really know what persecution is like in this country, but it's increasing. And so we need to I think God's giving us time now to practice. And the intimacy comes in the moment by moment. It's not something that, yes, we can grow closer going to retreat or something like that, but it's not something that we get a certificate in or we read a book in. It's the moment by moment being aware of what blocks intimacy and dealing with it.
But a lot of people, they would never probably connect the two together, intimacy with God and the return of the Lord. Kind of touch on why you decided to make those two one.
When I was praying myself, like I said, I felt fear to end times. I had a conversation with someone, and they were telling me all these things that were going to happen. I was so terrified. I thought, why even get up tomorrow if it's going to happen? Why should I send my daughter to school? I just want to hold on to her and wait till Jesus comes back. And then the Lord just really convicted me and started speaking to my heart about intimacy and also about connecting with the facets of his heart. He showed me that his heart is like a diamond, and if you only cut one facet, the glory, the shine doesn't come forth. You don't really experience him. But as you cut all of the facets of a diamond, the glory comes. And it's the same thing with God. As you connect with all the different facets, what is his heart toward you? How does he see you? What is his heart toward others? What is his heart toward Israel, toward the millennium, toward the end times, toward the biblical feast? And that's why I uniquely in the book, Unshaken, cover all of those, because as we connect with his heart toward the millennium and toward the temple, the millennial temple, and the biblical feasts and so forth, then we grow in intimacy with him. We connect with what's on his heart. We want our heart to connect with what's on his heart.
You do talk about in your teaching and the importance of the biblical feasts,
Yes.
and we may think, well, those are for the covenant, God's covenant people, the Jewish nation, and bygone era. But there's significance today. What is that significance, and why are we, I don't know, we don't really hear much about teachings on the biblical feasts and how to engage them in a new covenant way.
Yeah, I love teaching and experiencing the biblical feasts. And there's many reasons I think that we need to celebrate or to observe them, but one really is intimacy with him. Because he designed the feasts. I mean, they're not Jewish feasts, they're not something that the Jewish people made up. He designed the feasts, and so they're important to him. In fact, in the millennium, those who do not celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles will experience plagues and droughts, and so that tells you, he's serious about the feast. So there's special appointments with him. And so we wouldn't miss, as a woman, I wouldn't miss a hair appointment or nail appointment. Why would we miss an appointment with God?
Yeah.
So it's a special time of intimacy with him. Also, the spring feast, there's three feasts in the spring and 3 in the fall. The 3 in the spring were fulfilled already with Jesus' first coming. And the 3 in the fall will be fulfilled with his second coming. So each fall, as we observe Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, it gives us an anchor that we know for sure that Jesus is going to come back and fulfill these feasts. And we need to hold on in these times that are so uncertain. We need to hold on to the things we do know, and that's that Jesus will fulfill those feasts. And the other thing is that, in the millennium, we're going to be observing those feasts. We're going to be celebrating those feasts with Jesus himself. I don't want to wait till he comes back and say, what are you doing, Jesus? I want to know what he's doing. I want to understand the feast. I want to be able to enter into celebration with him.
Okay, so in a practical sense, for someone who lives in California, never heard of the feast, how would that person observe it? One of the feasts?
A great way is to attend a Messianic congregation.
Okay.
Now, Messianic congregations always observe and celebrate the feast. They're made up of believers in Yeshua, in Jesus. And so I would encourage that as kind of an easy way to do it. I mean, there's lots of books on the feast. They can attend Messianic Seders. Passover time is a wonderful time. I love to teach Passover Seders. It's an experience that there's so much that you can grow in intimacy with him, because with everything about God's heart, we have to look at what does that, for example, the feast, what does that communicate about who he is? What does it communicate about how he sees you? And so there's a lot in the Seder that tells you about your worth and your acceptance in him. And also tells you about his faithfulness and how he is into the details of your life. And so you grow in intimacy because you understand who he is and how he sees you. So you learn about the feast, but then you also learn about God himself and about how he sees you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today, Jeannie.
You're
We're gonna
welcome.
Have
It's
you
wonderful.
back
Thank you for having me.
For sure, because there's so
Okay.
much depth here.
Yes.
To connect with Jeannie, you can go to jeannenigro.com, or as always, go to our website, harvest-tv.com. You'll find a way to link back to her site and pick up a copy of Unshaken, Standing Firm in Uncertain Times. Coming up later, Brian Bush with the latest news from Israel, but up next, Switchfoot with their new music video, Live It Well. We'll be right back.